Hello all, and welcome to my 7th Paper Mario The Thousand Year Door tool-assisted speedrun. It's been a while since my last task for this game, but it was a pleasure to come back to this game once again. You'll notice right off the bat that there are some additional text boxes in this title screen, and that's actually because I have the memory card inserted. Unlike every previous iteration of the TTYD task, we actually need to make use of the game's save functionality in order to perform a newly discovered trick called Blimp Ticket Skip. It's thanks to Solidified Gaming's glitch hunting efforts that there's finally a method for this long theorized trick, and this was pretty much the reason that I decided to return back to this game. Through the video's title, you'll notice that I did not reach a sub 2 hour time, which we originally thought would be possible. However, after sitting on it, I really don't feel upset at all. This task is the result of the hard work of several people that have helped within the community, and after watching this hard work all come together to result in this task, I just can't be upset. I would immediately like to thank Solidified Gaming for his continued work in glitch hunting this game, Master June for his work in reverse engineering a sizable skip in the middle of the prologue, and JD Yaster and Trivial171 for their work in RNG manipulation and reverse engineering certain battle mechanics. I would not be as satisfied with the outcome of this task without you guys, so thank you all for your help along the way. As I mentioned, this task includes the newly found Blimp Ticket Skip. I'll explain the execution of the trick when it occurs after Chapter 6. After Palace Skip, Blimp Ticket Skip became the next holy grail of time savers in TTYD, and it could save up to 20 minutes depending on which theoretical method to perform it actually turned out to work. Blimp Ticket Skip allows us to reach Glitzville and obtain Yoshi without the need to complete Chapter 2. We do need Flurry and the Super Boots from Chapter 2, however, but this trick effectively cuts out the majority of the Great Tree. Coincidentally, this trick was made public as soon as I finished my last final exam before summer started, so since I had a bit more free time, I decided to jump back into TTYD. So starting on May 5th, 2019, I began working on this task and was able to finish it on August 24th, 2019, totaling 111 days or about 3.5 months. With about 64,000 re-records, this is an improvement of 15 minutes and 54 seconds over my previously published task. We estimate that about 1 minute was saved due to skipping a small sequence in both the prologue and late game, 11.5 minutes were saved due to Blimp Ticket Skip, 1 minute was saved in Chapter 7 due to a new sequence skip, and about 2.5 minutes were saved due to a newly found warp at the very end of Chapter 8. We've reached the Rogueport docks, and once I gain control of Mario, you'll see that I continuously jump, making use of a trick called Speed Swap. In this game, your up and down or Z-axis speed is about 19% faster than moving left and right across the X-axis. As it turns out, you can move up or down for 1/60th of a second, or 1 frame, and continuously jump on the first frame possible to preserve this larger speed value. This trick most likely saves several minutes overall from faster movement. We meet up with Goombella, who's being attacked by Lord Crump. We can take him out easily in 2 turns with double jumps and a super guard. If you time a B press within 3 frames of your enemy hitting you, you'll ignore any damage taken and instead deal 1 damage to the enemy. Interestingly, all enemy attacks in the English version of the game can be super guarded, however, the Japanese version has several enemies which cannot be super guarded, and as it turns out, we'll have to take this into account later in the route. After the fight, a horde of X-Nauts ambushes Mayu and Goombella. Each of the X-Nauts' movement is actually dependent on RNG, and as a result, this cutscene is dynamic, meaning its length can vary. To optimize the cutscene, I had to try to get an RNG value that resulted in all the X-Nauts reaching their standing position, aka before they jump at Mario, as fast as possible. With that out of the way, I can regain control of Mario and make my way towards Central Rogueport. Once inside Central Rogueport, Mario and Goombella discuss a bit about themselves, what they're doing in Rogueport, and Mario will reveal that he has a magical map that can help them search for the Crystal Stars to save Peach and subsequently the world. Once Toadsworth comes on screen, there's a mini cutscene that plays in the background between the Craws and the Piantas. Only after this cutscene ends can we progress to the end of Toadsworth's dialogue. To take advantage of this, I wasted frames in certain parts of the text boxes to change RNG for optimal Zest T movement in the top left corner of this room. However, as it turns out, it's actually faster to skip her sequence entirely. To skip Zest T, we'll be using a respawn glitch in the sewers to reach West Rogueport underground after Chapter 2. Unfortunately, this means we will not be able to backtrack to Central Rogueport to grab the Ultra Hammer, since we would have to loop back underground to get past Zest T. And because we skipped the Ultra Hammer, I'll actually have to use a different version of Palace Skip compared to the last few TASs. There's also a small bug where Goomthler the Goomba in this cutscene can walk backwards, however, I'm very saddened to say that I did not succeed in getting it after spending about an hour or so on it. Once I regain control of Mayu again, I make my way straight to the item shop since we skipped Zesty. Once inside, I purchase 7 Fright Masks and 3 Fire Flowers. There's a 1-frame window where you can hammer and still grab the item, so I do that a couple times for fun. Fright Masks are the quickest way to end battles against weaker enemies, however, they only give you 1 star point after the battle, so in order to optimally route our XP leveling, we'll need to use Fire Flowers instead during some fights. I head outside and hit the save block. There's extra dialogue when you hit the save block for the first time, and it's actually faster to get this dialogue over with than have Goombella yell at you for not saving at the end of the room. This is a newly discovered trick called Fence Skip. This NPC named Goomfree can only walk in a circle that I'll call his home. When he reaches the edge of his home, he'll step outside for 1 frame, realize he reached the edge, and turn back to face the center. However, on the frame that he steps outside, we can walk up next to him and pause and unpause. As a result, he'll remain stopped outside of his circle. We can then manipulate him to walk in front of Merlin's door. When we try to enter, Goomfree pushes us outside. When we're in this black void, certain object hitboxes are unloaded, allowing Mayu to walk through the normally solid fence and enter the sewers. This skips the entire sequence of talking to Professor Frankly, saving almost a minute. However, when we enter the sewers, the game advances our sequence to one that assigns Frankly as your follower, so he'll appear anyway. For a more detailed explanation of Fence Skip, check out the video on my channel. This Goomba Trio fight can be ended quickly through the use of a Fire Flower. Interestingly, in the English version of the game, there's a method to skip this battle. However, it doesn't work in the Japanese version of the game because the moving platform actually doesn't move as far to the left as in the English version. This trick would save around 45 seconds, so it's a shame that this isn't possible for this TAS. After this fight, we discovered you can just barely land on the top ledge on the right side to catch the first platform cycle. This is not possible on the left side due to slightly different wall hitbox placement, and this method is slightly faster than waiting for a bit and then jumping from the left stairs to the platform. Since I used a Fire Flower, I freed up a spot for another item. Since we pass right by this Fire Flower, I grab it while making my way to the pipe. In addition, I break both blocks in front of the pipe because there are several instances where I'll need to head to the left from the pipe, so rather than go around the left block both times, it's faster to just break it immediately so I can take a direct path to the loading zone. Though we're able to skip certain paper abilities, the airplane ability is required to reach Chapter 1 and to get to Grodus' lair in Chapter 8. Once we grab the key for the airplane curse chest, I make my way into the back room to obtain the airplane ability. Going back to version differences, it's important to mention why I'm using the Japanese version of the game. The Japanese version of the game was released a few months before the PAL and NTSC-U versions. As a result, certain mechanics are different, which cause certain tricks and glitches to operate differently. Because of this, the Japanese version ends up being around 15 minutes faster. Funnily enough, thanks to glitch hunting success in the other versions of the game, the gap between the NTSC/PAL and the Japanese version is much smaller than it used to be. At its largest, the Japanese version was over an hour faster. It's amazing to look back and see the incredible glitch hunting developments over the years. I'll put it this way, since my first published TAS, the final time for the TAS has been lowered by almost 3 hours. Normally after getting the airplane ability, we want to make our way to the 1000-year door to activate the magical map and reveal the location of the first crystal star. However, we can make use of a trick called the Blooper Skip to make our way to the Chapter 1 pipe without completing the blooper fight sequence, which only occurs after you visit the 1000-year door. If you jump on the first frame when entering a room, and continuously jump or land on a boat panel, and then fall into a body of water, the game will fail to update your respawn location and will instead place you at coordinate 0 on the X and Z axes. This respawn mechanic is called the Hazard Respawn Glitch, and with that we've entered Chapter 1 with a time of 9 minutes and 14 seconds, which is about 1 minute and 11 seconds faster than the previous TAS. As a result of skipping the ending sequence of the prologue, Frankly is never set to stop following us. From this point until the start of Chapter 2, Frankly will be tagging along for the ride. There's an interesting theoretical time saver here. In order to unlock the pipe to Hooktail's castle, we have to place down a moonstone and a sunstone on 2 rocks on either side of the center pedestal to reveal 2 blue blocks. I then have to hit both of these blocks within a certain amount of time between each other in order to reveal the pipe. The pipe located within the center pedestal still has a hitbox before getting rid of the pedestal. Therefore, if we were able to somehow activate this pipe without getting rid of the pedestal, we could effectively cut out the entire Petalburg and Schwank Fortress sequence. In the following room, we can again make use of the hazard respawn glitch like I did when entering Chapter 1. Instead of jumping first frame, I can actually start a speed swap because the respawn boundary for the body of water doesn't reach the edge of the room. Once I land from falling, there is 1 frame where I can jump mid-air to land on the other side of the water. This allows me to skip going into the background and revealing the bridge. This bridge will later appear on its own when I advance to a later sequence. So again, to enter Hooktail's castle, I'll need to head to Schwank Fortress to obtain the moon and sunstones. In order to unlock the path to Schwank Fortress, I first have to talk to the mayor of the town 1 room over. There is a way for me to get out of bounds in this room, and we've theorized that we could go around the gate blocking our way towards Schwank. However, there are invisible walls that prevent us from bypassing the gate. We'll first have to talk to the Mayor Croup and request that we pass through. After that, we'll have to talk to the gatekeeper. As I make my way over to the gatekeeper, I receive my first email in the game. At this point, the game detects that I have not yet opened any emails, so some text boxes pop up describing how to access and view emails. This text will repeatedly show up for each email I get unless I open an email at some point. Because of this, I'll have to read an email later in the chapter. We also get a quick chat in with Coops, who I'll obtain later in Chapter 1. It's also worth mentioning that angling slightly towards walls gives Mario an additional speed boost, so if there are any fences, for example, that aren't too far out of the way, it's usually faster to push off of them. After this room is a bald cleft fight, however, we can make use of Goombella buffers to avoid them. By activating Goombella 3 frames before moving towards a loading zone, the game will fail to check if you're in contact with the loading zone, allowing you to pass straight through it if done right. Because of this, I can walk out of bounds along the perimeter of these rooms and reach the other loading zone. I can repeat this trick again for the Bristles fight. Interestingly, the positions of the left loading zones are actually different between the 2 seemingly identical rooms, resulting in there being a small gap between the wall and the loading zone in the Bristles room. We've theorized we could maybe squeeze through this gap without Goombella buffering to save a few seconds, but we were not successful in getting Mario's hitbox through that tiny gap. In order to enter the Schwank sewers, which hold the sun and moonstones, we need to first take a quiz hosted by this thwomp. He just gives me some general trivia about locations and items. I complete the quiz when I get 5 correct answers. After each answer, there's a chance for the thwomp to ask, "Are you sure?" except for questions 1 and 5, where the thwomp will always ask this. In addition to answering correctly, I also have to manipulate RNG to avoid this extra "Are you sure?" dialogue. Since Frankly was never set to leave our party, he just awkwardly stands next to the thwomp, which I personally think is hilarious. With 5 correct answers, the thwomp ends the quiz and moves to reveal the pipe to the Schwank sewers, where I'll at last find the sun and moonstones. There were several instances where I had to backtrack to this location, and as a result, I was able to dedicate more time to testing our route. As it turns out, it was fastest to go to the right towards the sunstone first, before going to the left. This is ultimately due to the pipe slightly blocking my path if I were to try to go directly to the left first. In addition, I also grabbed the multi-bounce badge. This badge will allow me to jump on and therefore eliminate each enemy in a battle in a single turn. It'll be used in Chapter 3 and Chapter 7. Each of these stones is guarded by a group of fuzzies. They only have 3 health, so I can quickly take them out just with a fire flower. In previous versions of the TTYD TAS, I've managed to manipulate an HP drain item to appear in the audience, which can be used to deal damage to the mini-boss of the sewers a little bit faster than I normally would. However, due to the blooper skip I performed to get to the Chapter 1 pipe, I'm left without any audience members to manipulate items from. In addition, it's interesting to note that these fuzzies cannot drop items after the battle, so unfortunately I can't get an HP drain drop either. I'll take this time to explain how manipulating RNG works. RNG is the implemented system for determining random events occurring. You can think of RNG values as a list of seemingly random numbers. If I get an outcome that causes me to lose time, I can simply advance to the next number in the list, and I will have effectively changed the outcome of the random event. Mario makes a random noise every time he jumps, so as a result, RNG is updated whenever I jump. So by jumping a different number of times while I'm speed swapping, I can effectively fluctuate what RNG value is used when determining certain events. In this scenario, the fuzzies in that narrow hallway are always a pain to deal with, so I can jump a different number of times such that they do not encounter me, and such that I don't have to move out of my way to avoid them. For this gold fuzzy fight, I can simply double jump, double head bonk with Goombella, super guard, double jump, and use my last remaining fire flower. When the fuzzies come to surround the gold fuzzy, their movement is randomized, and because of this, the cutscene is actually dynamically linked. This is pretty much identical to the way the X-Naut ambush cutscene in the prologue works. As a result, I had to brute force wasting frames in different spots in the battle to result in the shortest cutscene duration I could manage. To go into more detail on how this manipulation works, RNG updates to the next value in the list twice per character of text on screen. So if I have a text box with 50 characters, every 1/60th of a second, the game advances 100 values further in the list. To take advantage of this, let's say I only want to waste one frame. Well, since there are different text boxes in the battle, I can waste that one frame in different spots in the battle and effectively get different value outcomes. Since I've successfully obtained both the Sun and Moonstones, I can make my way back towards Hooktail's castle after passing through Petalburg. These rooms are super easy to optimize since I'm going left the entire time. The only trouble arises when enemies are in my path. In that case, I can just jump a different number of times to produce scenarios where enemies are not in my way. In addition, I grabbed the POW block back there for use in the Redbone's fight in Hooktail's castle. In West Petalburg, I can get a small boost by falling over top of the small Toad NPC to save a couple frames. In the next room, we encounter Coops again, who met us briefly after talking to the gatekeeper in Petalburg. Coops now wants to join our party to avenge his father, who supposedly went off into Hooktail's castle never to return. It's interesting to note that I can actually enter Hooktail's castle without the normally required use of Coops through optimizing my movement between the blue switches, so it's actually possible to skip Coops. I even did so in previous versions of the TTYD TAS. However, I will need Coops in order to perform Blimp Ticket Skip, so I can't skip him in this TAS. Before we head off to Hooktail's castle, I first have to deal with Coops' girlfriend, Coopie, who asks that Coops not go to the dangerous castle. Coops denies her request and stands firm that he wants to go with Mario. As I make my way left towards the bridge, I grab a fire flower which, in addition to the POW block from earlier, I'll need for the Redbone's battle soon. And as you can see, even though we skipped the bridge when going to Petalburg, the bridge appeared out of thin air on our way back since our sequence was updated. Like I mentioned, I can access Hooktail's castle without the use of Coops, and this method is actually faster than using him. Normally you fall very slowly after jumping on these blue blocks, however, if I pause on top of them and then jump first frame, I can immediately jump towards the other blue block without falling slowly. This gives me a 4-frame window to hit the other block, assuming perfect movement. And with that, I've revealed the pipe to Hooktail's castle. Whenever we're in the background of a room, it's always fastest to constantly perform small jumps. For some reason, your jump speed in the background is greater than your walking speed, and on your jump descent, your speed is actually constantly decreasing. Therefore, constant, small jumps are always best. Upon entering Hooktail's castle, I can just barely make it across the bridge with a speed swap jump. This skips the use of a plane panel, which saves around 10 seconds or so. Once inside the castle, I quickly grab the Power Bounce badge, which I would argue is one of the most overpowered badges in the game. This badge allows you to continuously jump on an enemy, so long as you time your 8 presses correctly. After a set number of jumps that varies by enemy, you have a chance to get what we call capped, which means you're forced to stop jumping. In this jail cell room we encounter Redbones. By activating him and jumping shortly after, I can begin a trick called Redbone Skip. After the Dull Bones ambush me, if I jump right before Coops starts talking, I can cause the battle to instantly start. This skips the process of me hammering my way through the Dull Bones towards the Redbones. We don't really know the specifics of why this works yet, unfortunately. I can quickly take the Dull Bones out using the POW block and finish off the Redbones through a Fire Flower. I choose to level up FP or flower points rather than health or badge points. Power bounces cost 3 FP each, and I'll have to power bounce a Chapter 1 boss 3 times for a total of 9 flower points. Jumping first frame after leaving a battle activates what we call Speed Glitch, where my jump is immediately cancelled and our speed is for some reason set to 3, which is 12% faster than speed swapping or 50% faster than normal walking. In the following room, I ride the purple block to the top and go through the loading zone so I can set up for a Goombella buffer similar to that from the battles I skipped in Schwank Fortress. I activate Goombella, wait 3 frames, and then move left towards the loading zone to completely bypass it. I can then navigate out of bounds to fall back inside the room. This skips the process of obtaining the key for the door in the previous room to save a few seconds. After switching to Coops, I have to shoot him towards this red switch to raise up a jail cell door so I can pass on to the next area. If I jump under the small arch in the jail cell, I can actually obtain Speed Glitch again, just like after the Red Bones battle, increasing my movement speed until I open the door. I open the chest to reveal a key for the black chest in the previous room, which will give us a new ability. For now though, I have to deal with this maze room. A ceiling with spikes on it is being lowered slowly, and I have to escape before the timer runs out. As I make my way towards the door, I can constantly make use of wall pushes to propel myself forward and save a few seconds. Now that I've escaped, I can use the newly obtained key to unlock the black chest. This new ability will allow us to transform into a thin sheet of paper, allowing us to squeeze through small spaces. In addition, Mario's paper mode hitbox becomes a bit smaller, which will have certain advantages later in the run. I can now use the paper mode ability to squeeze back through the jail cell bars. Afterwards, I make my way into the jail cell to the left to grab the Attack Effects R badge. This badge, when equipped, will produce a cricket noise which will actually lower the Chapter 1 boss's defense stat, allowing me to actually do damage with my jumps. Next, I'll have to backtrack a few rooms to grab a key that's behind another set of jail cell doors. Once I make it back to the Red Bones room, I can use paper mode to get behind the jail cell bars. On the first frame of unspinning from paper mode, I can repeatedly jump to delay the unspin animation. When I delay it, I'm actually able to move faster than if I were to unspin normally. With this key, we can unlock a higher level of the castle. To skip the process of using Coops here, I can jump on the switch, pause and unpause, and immediately jump off of the switch towards the block, right before the block rises up in the air. In this room, I can jump on the switch, pause while going into paper mode, and unpause after the transformation is done to perform what's called a paper mode cutscene walk. I'm actually able to cover some distance while the cutscene is still occurring. I'll be able to make use of this again in Chapter 2 as well. During that pause, I actually equipped Power Bounce and the Attack Effects R badges. After barely avoiding the Dull Bones, I can skip the use of Coops here by making use of the same switch pausing technique as earlier. I was able to somehow get Coops to fly upwards, and I'm not really sure why. Partners in this version of the game are not programmed well, as shown by this random moon jump. I first head towards the left room to obtain the key for the right door. In this room, I meet Miss Mouse, who is snooping around for items to steal. Among these items is the key to the right door. After leaving the room, I would normally encounter this dull bones, however, if I pause frame perfectly, I can actually avoid the battle altogether. In the following room, we normally need to use the airplane panel to reach the next door, however, I can make use of a trick called a double jump. First I shoot out Coops and hold him there such that I can let Coops go, jump, and trigger the battle via Coops. So now I've entered a battle mid-air. Upon leaving the battle, there's a 1-frame window where I can jump mid-air now. As a result, I can just barely make it up to the top ledge without ever having to use the plane panel, saving a few seconds. To access the next door, I'll need to lower this block and grab the key. Here's another example of the great programming for partners. I've now reached the top of Hooktail's castle and have to walk up the spiral stairs towards Hooktail's lair. Hooktail's first phase has 20 health, so we can first do 11 power bounces and then 10 power bounces. The first bounce doesn't do damage because the cricket sound from the attack effects R badge only affects all jumps after the first one. Like I said, power bounce caps are randomly determined, and they are determined on each jump after a certain number of jumps, so I can perform what's called a stylish trick on different jumps to get the RNG value to fluctuate when determining whether or not to set the cap on a given jump. It's faster here to get chomped by Hooktail than to avoid taking damage. For the last phase of the battle, I can simply do 10 power bounces to defeat Hooktail. I found it funny that since Frankly was never intended to be here, his lighting is completely incorrect. So, Coops is reunited with his dad, and we obtain the first Crystal Star with a time of 28:37, which is 45 seconds faster overall than the previous TAS. Time was lost compared to the last TAS because I didn't perform Coop Skip like I did in my old TAS. However, the cutscene with Coops' girlfriend will still occur post-Chapter 1 in the old TAS, even though I skipped Coops, so I'll end up making a lot of that time back up. In between each chapter is an intermission period where you get to play as Peach and Bowser. During Peach's intermission, we get to understand a bit about the X-Naut organization. She's being held captive on their base on the moon, and she will have to navigate to their computer room to send Mario a message regarding her whereabouts. Funnily enough, since Frankly is never set to leave, he'll follow both Peach and Bowser around the entire time. Once I gain control of Peach, the fastest method of moving is a variation of speed swapping. If I move up or down for 2 frames instead of 1, I can actually walk for 14 frames in any direction while maintaining the increased Z-axis speed. Once I make my way into the next room, Peach meets the Xnaut supercomputer, Tech. Peach interacts a bit with Tech and then transmits a message to Mario. For the Bowser intermission, I can use the same identical movement method as in the Peach intermission. After gaining control of Mario again, I have to backtrack to Rogueport and visit the 1000-Year Door to reveal the location of the next Crystal Star. Before receiving Peach's email, I manipulated the mystery in the bush to land near the bridge. This way, after I close the email and cross the bridge, I can actually grab the mystery item without going out of my way. I'll end up using this mystery during a mini-boss fight in Chapter 2. In addition, I grabbed the mushroom here for use in under a minute from now, and also in Chapter 2 for a trick called Paper Mode Item Jumps. To perform a Paper Mode item jump, we first go into Paper Mode up against this yellow block. On the same frame that I unspin, I pause and consume my mushroom. This results in me jumping up in the air while using the item. In addition, because I just unspun from Paper Mode, my hitbox hasn't grown to its normal size from Paper Mode yet. As a result, I'm able to rise above the yellow block, but when I fall down, my hitbox is full size, allowing me to land on the block. In addition, I used a trick called Sort Glitch to actually keep the mushroom in my inventory after consuming it. This is done by pausing in the item menu, opening the sort menu, then changing the sort and unpausing on the same frame. This will cause the sort functionality to still work when you reopen the pause menu. Consuming an item and then changing the sort such that the item is no longer in the same position in your inventory results in the item not being consumed.
Oh.
So Professor frankly explains to us how to get to the location of the next crystal star, and though it may seem like he's going to stay inside his house, there's actually a duplicate, frankly, that still follows me around. To enter the next area, the Boggly Woods, I'll need to traverse down a few levels in the sewers to a back room. After making my way into the back room, I talk with this Puny, a native resident of the Boggly tree. We soon learn that the X-Nauts have taken over the home of the Punies, resulting in this Puny named Punio being displaced. He leads us to a secret passage that holds a pipe to the Boggly Woods. With that, I've entered Chapter 2 with a time of 38:48, which is about 1 minute and 10 seconds faster than the old TAS. Punio is actually not set to follow us until a little bit farther in the chapter, so frankly still follows us for the time being. Chapter 2 is where the run begins to break entirely. During Chapter 2, I'll actually not be entering the Great Tree, if you're familiar with that area. The Great Tree is the home of the Punies, and for now, the storyline requires that we go visit the area near the tree. These are the Shadow Sirens, and they've sided with the X-Nauts to stop Mario from obtaining all the Crystal Stars. For now, they're somehow completely oblivious to Mario standing right next to them, so we won't be fighting them until a little bit later in the chapter. I obtained this honey syrup to regain FP later in the chapter. In addition, I encounter this piranha plant so that I can get down to 1 HP. I'll explain the benefits of this later. Also, it was faster to get first struck by the piranha rather than wait for the plant to stop striking in the overworld before encountering it. Unfortunately, we have to say goodbye to a good friend. Frankly, I'm sorry, but we can no longer have you in our party. After entering the pipe into the background, Punia appears out of thin air and will remain with us for quite a bit as well. Once at the tree, we talk to Punia and soon realize the tree has been taken over by the X-Nauts. After a bit, Punia recalls that there's a hidden entrance somewhere. After following him up the tree branch and talking to him again, he suggests that we go visit Madame Flurry, who may be able to help. She lives farther in the Boggly Woods, so I'll have to go find her. Conveniently, I get to watch a cutscene with her and her house so that I can locate it. Once back in the foreground, there's about a 2-frame window where I can jump off the pipe before Punia starts talking, saving a bit of time. Once I make my way up the ramp, I can use a paper mode item jump identical to the one after Chapter 1, to make my way up top without using the normally intended plane panel. In addition, I also use the sort glitch to keep the honey syrup in my inventory. In the following room, I can go into paper mode behind this tree, unspin, and jump. The increase in my hitbox when I unspin will cause Mario to get pushed by the tree through the back wall. This allows me to enter the pipe immediately, rather than navigate to the right and go through the hole in the wall. And with that, we've reached Flurry's house. Once inside Flurry's house, I need to save and soft reset the game. Soft resetting can be done by pressing and holding B, X, and Start. As a result, my current file will be saved and I can return to the main menu. From here, I need to copy the file over to a new file, and this brings me to why I had to insert the memory card from the beginning of the game. I'll actually need to return to Flurry's house later in order to obtain a state called jump storage that can actually traverse between different save files. I'll have to save in a later state, load the other save at Flurry's house, perform jump storage, die, load the later save file, and execute a super jump with the jump storage. I'll explain jump storage and super jumps as they happen later in the run, so sorry for the ambiguity now. For now though, we've encountered Madame Flurry behind her bedroom door. She doesn't want to come out because she's lost her precious necklace, and without it, she can't be seen in public apparently. As a result, Mario agrees to go hunt down the necklace so that Flurry can come let them into the Great Tree. I'll have to backtrack my way towards the Shadow Sirens and encounter them in order to retrieve the necklace. Sadly, there's no way to pass through the wall near the pipe like I did when going towards the pipe before, so as a result I have to go all the way over to the right and use paper mode to pass through the gap in the wall. While doing so, I activate Sword Glitch and consume a mushroom to bring my HP up a bit. If I didn't use my mushroom, I would actually end up dying by falling into water later. It may seem like this negated the need for going down to 1 HP earlier via the piranha plant, but I assure you I'll explain this later when it becomes relevant. On my way back, I can use a paper mode cutscene walk similar to the one in Hooktail's castle in order to activate this switch while still leaving the room. That switch will raise the airplane panel in that room. I make sure to wait a certain amount of time before reaching the loading zone, otherwise the cutscene will occur but the plane panel will not actually be raised when I re-enter the room. Raising that airplane panel is faster because when I pass through that room again, I can now use the raised airplane panel to reach the top ledge by the loading zone, without having to perform the paper mode item jump. I finally encountered the Shadow Sirens in an attempt to get Flurry's necklace back. Instead of taking them all out in one turn like previous TASs, we found that it was actually a bit faster to spread attacks out across 2 separate turns in order to avoid using the Earth Tremor special ability. This ability can deal a lot of damage in one turn but takes a long time to execute. Instead, I jump on Marilyn twice since she has the most health. I then Power Shell with Coops to attack all of them. From there, I need to Super Guard Vivian and Marilyn. Since Beldam will be defeated without Super Guarding, and the animation for Super Guarding her is slower than not Super Guarding, it's faster to just use a regular guard. From there, I manipulated the mystery item to turn into a Thunder Rage. From there, another Power Shell from Coops will knock the trio out. On the first frame after leaving the battle, I can jump to gain a bit of distance towards the necklace. After picking it up, I need to go to the right, but I can make use of the game's respawn system to get me there a faster way. I can go to the left, wedge myself between the wall and the tree, and use the tree's hitbox to push me through the left wall. As a result, Mayu will respawn from where he entered the room, which is conveniently the loading zone on the right. Since I used the paper mode cutscene walk to raise the airplane panel earlier, I can use the plane ability for the first time. For the most part, the most optimal method of movement in the plane ability is nosediving for 1 frame and pulling back for 2 frames. However, when I get towards the end, it's faster to do a bit more of a nosedive and then pull back all the way. Again, to get to Flurry's house, I can abuse the hitbox of the tree to push me through the wall near the pipe. With the necklace, we can now meet Flurry face to face and convince her to join our party. Flurry's one ability, called the Gale Force, will become a very useful attack as it can blow away all enemies from a battle within a single turn. However, that's not the main reason we obtain her. We actually need Flurry to perform a glitch called Teleporter Room early. There's a teleporter in the Rogueport sewers that can warp us to the X-Naut secret base on the moon. In normal circumstances, we're only able to access the locked teleporter on our departure from Chapter 7. However, Solidified Gaming and I developed a method for accessing the teleporter before Chapter 7 with the use of Flurry. When you press X with Flurry, Mayu will begin to hold Flurry and squeeze her to let a burst of wind out. This ability will end up having certain side effects that allow for Teleporter Room early to occur. I'll explain the technical side of that trick as it happens a little bit later. So now that I've obtained Flurry, I need to backtrack towards the Great Tray so that Flurry can help us find the secret entrance. While going through the wall, I use a honey syrup to replenish FP for later fights. Going back through the plane panel room the second time, it's faster to stay in the foreground than to go to the back ledge. The only reason I went to the back ledge the previous time was in order to hit the airplane panel switch back there. So I'm supposed to bring Flurry to the Great Tree, or at least that's the intended way. This is where the linearity of the game starts to break entirely. I'm going to skip the majority of the Great Tree. As a result, Punia will follow us until I get Yoshi. I do, however, need the Super Boots, which are accessible near the end of the Great Tree. Rather than complete the Great Tree normally, we discovered a workaround that will allow us to skip most of the Great Tree and still obtain the Super Boots. In order to begin exploiting this workaround, I first need to make my way back towards the Rogueport sewers. Once back in the sewers, I need to make my way to the teleporter room. I will enter the X-Naut base, advance the game to a Chapter 7 state, and then go back to the Great Tree. As a result, the entrance will be unlocked and the room containing the super boots will be accessible through the use of another trick that I'll explain later. To get through the following two rooms, I can use the hazard respawn glitch to land in the center of the room after jumping first frame when entering the room. This is the exact reason why I had to use my mushroom after leaving Flurry's house for the first time. After making my way to the western part of the sewers, I now want to go up a few levels. On my way to the left, I use Flurry to reveal the pipe to the Pit of 100 Trials room, which is attached to the 1000-Year Door room. It's faster to reveal it now as I pass by it since I already have Flurry out, because I'll have a different partner out when I pass by it the next time. In the next room, I confirmed that it's actually possible to jump from the slanted portion of the pipe onto the save block. I'll now perform Teleporter Room early. I first jam myself underneath the low ceiling of this water fountain in order to obtain a state called Paper Glitch where it appears as if I'm in paper mode though I'm walking at full speed. I then open the bar door and Mario acts as if he's in paper mode and slowly walks inside, stopping outside due to the paper mode's slower speed. I can then open the door and press X to use Flurry's abilities several times. Repeatedly pressing X while opening a door causes Mario to slide towards the camera, and that actually allows him to pass through the normally solid wall around the teleporter room. From there, it's as easy as activating the teleporter and warping to the X-Naught base. I specifically say the X-Naught base and not Chapter 7 because the game currently does not process that we're in a Chapter 7 state. Luckily, there's a sequence trigger I can activate a few rooms away. There's a red note that contains a password to take a quiz in Chapter 7, and reading this note will actually update your state to mid-Chapter 7. After simply reading this note, I immediately leave and make my way back towards the Great Tree to obtain the Super Boots. I now want to explain the Super Jump. During certain scenarios, we can put Mario in a state in which he has begun a jump, but is set to have not landed on the ground yet. As a result, if we gain upward velocity through a small step, for example, we can infinitely jump upwards. I can use this to bypass the barrier preventing me from accessing the east sewers from here. To set this up, I first need to switch to Coops and shoot him to the left such that he hits the wall and leaves his shell. I can then reopen the teleporter door while using Coops. Keeping him far enough away from me delays his starting animation. This delay, after reopening the door, causes Mario to jump on Coops for one frame, flagging that he started the jump, but never unsets that flag. From there, I can go up a step to gain Y velocity and perform a super jump. In the meantime, I've actually been carefully manipulating RNG in order to obtain a 1 in 46,000 scenario to occur. The single most overpowered badge in this game is the Mega Rush, and I just manipulated 2 to occur at the same time in this room by only wasting 0.2 of a second. Items and badges in this game can randomly appear in battles, and each enemy has a list of which items and badges it can drop. Luckily, Hammer Bros can drop Mega Rushes. Each Mega Rush appearance is about a 1 in 214 chance, and battle RNG, including badge and item holds, are determined at the same time, so effectively the chance for both Mega Rushes appearing is 1 in 46,000. I have a much more detailed video on my channel explaining how this was all done with the tremendous help of JD Aster and Trivial171. Please feel free to check that explanation out and visit JD Aster or Trivial's social media links in the description of this video. Mega Rush badges boost your attack damage by 5 for each Mega Rush equipped. That's right, you can actually stack Mega Rushes, so after obtaining both of these, my base attack will increase by 10. With these newly acquired badges, I'll need to increase the number of badge points that I can use. For some reason, Mega Rushes only cost 1 badge point each, so they're not very costly. Once I leave the battle, I grab a mushroom from the block. This mushroom will help me fill up my inventory, which is a requirement for Palace Skip. There is a warp pipe in the sewers that can take me directly to the Great Tree, however, it requires the use of Super Boots, which we don't have yet. In fact, that's what I need to go get right now. To reiterate, I want to be in a Chapter 7 state when obtaining the Super Boots because when I enter the Great Tree now, I will not encounter any cutscenes pertaining to the Chapter 2 storyline. Likewise, all areas of the tree will now be unlocked and accessible. We estimate that this simply saves a few minutes. You may be wondering why I didn't utilize this strategy in the previous TAS. Ultimately, the main constraint is our sequence position. If we were to use the same technique to skip the majority of the Great Tree, then we would be stuck. Yoshi is a required partner due to Palace Skip, and before the era of Blimp Ticket Skip, we could only access Chapter 3 by talking to Don Pianta. This character can only give us said Blimp Ticket if we're in a post-Chapter 2 and pre-Chapter 3 state. Due to these constraints, there's no known way for us to obtain this necessary sequence position while still skipping the Great Tree. Luckily for this task, I can perform Blimp Ticket Skip to completely negate the need for the Blimp Ticket, and therefore the required post-Chapter 2 and pre-Chapter 3 state. Right before entering the Great Tree in the background, I swapped partners to Goombella. I'll need to perform a Goombella buffer again, just like in Chapter 1, to get past a loading zone. The room I'm about to enter normally contains a fight with the Jabbies, a rival species in the tree. However, due to our Chapter 7 state, they're not there, but their hive is still blocking the doorway. Luckily, there's a way to get out of bounds. I first get past the loading zone with a Goombella buffer. I then go into paper mode and go up against the wall. I then pause, unspin, and jump on the same frame and unpause. As a result, I will be pushed past the back wall of the loading zone and get out of bounds. From there, I can simply maneuver around the edge of the room to get into the right loading zone. And with that, I've reached the Super Boots. The Super Boots will allow me to do a ground pound to break panels beneath me. This will make literally zero sense, but I need to go to Chapter 6 next, specifically Poshley Heights, and the only way of accessing that area of the game is through the blue warp pipe rooms in the Rogueport sewers. Those pipes need to be unlocked with ground pounds. It's a funny thing to note that normally you're supposed to visit Toadette for 4 different upgrades, but this is actually the only time we will ever see her in this run. In the previous room, I can use a Goombella buffer to quickly get to the lower level, skipping the use of the ground pound here. Grabbing the Super Boots actually updated the game to a Chapter 2 state, so after re-entering the room with the Jabby Hive, the cutscene with the Jabbies will start. We immediately get kicked out of the room because there are no Punies in our party to fight against the Jabbies. To explain the weird routing a little bit further, I'll need to explain the basis for Blimp Ticket Skip. As you've maybe already guessed, I'll need to make use of jump storage and the infinite jump that we call the super jump. When I performed the previous super jump in the sewers, I didn't really explain the scenario that allows for jump storage in the first place. To set up jump storage, we need 2 things. The first is a cutscene with a position-based trigger, and the second is either Coops or Yoshi. Since we don't have Yoshi, obviously Coops is our only option. In North Rogueport, where the Blimp to Glitzville is, we know of a method of getting out of bounds to land onto the train tracks from the top of the stairs. From there, the train tracks out of bounds can give us Y velocity, so the only question is, when is there a position-based cutscene that occurs at the top of the stairs in North Rogueport? And the answer is the post-Chapter 6 Peach email cutscene after coming off of the train. As a result, we'll need to complete the end of Chapter 6, complete the intermission, and enter the cutscene afterwards to begin the process of Blimp Ticket Skip. Like I mentioned, in order to get to Chapter 6 in our current state, I'll need to backtrack to the Rogueport sewers and use the blue warp pipes to reach Poshley Heights. Just like earlier, I'll have to use hazard respawn glitch to get on top of the giant blocks in the middle of these rooms. After reaching the left room, I can use the newly acquired Super Boots to hit the switch to unlock the Poshley Heights warp pipe. After hitting the switch, I can immediately fall back into the water to respawn back on top of the block. It's unfortunately not possible to jump from the switch to the block itself because the block is too tall. Once inside Poshley Heights, I have to make my way towards the save block located a few rooms up. In order to complete Chapter 6, I'll actually have to perform a super jump inside the Poshley Sanctum. In order to get jump storage, our only available option is to make use of the save file that I created a lot earlier in Chapter 2. So I can just save my file, soft reset the game, and load up the other file. Also, a fun piece of trivia, the beginning of the Japanese version of the title screen music is actually different than the other versions of the game. Listen carefully and you'll notice. Upon loading the file, I walk towards the cutscene and activate Coups such that Mario begins jumping to hit Coups for 1 frame. This starts Mario's jump and sets that flag, but never unsets the flag. Therefore, we've established jump storage, and we will now be able to perform a super jump as long as I get some Y velocity. And here's why I had to use the Piranha to get to 1 HP. In order to bring jump storage over to the other file, I need to die in this file. Dying in the background can be very slow, so it's fastest to get into peril first, and then only have to fall in the background once. With our newly established jump storage, I can simply load up the Poshley Heights file and continue on my way towards the Poshley Sanctum. It's important to note, however, that I cannot jump until I want to perform the super jump. Attempting to jump normally will result in the game resetting the flag that allows for the super jump to occur in the first place. As a result, I have to do constant walking speed swaps, identical to the ones from the Peach and Bowser intermissions. I still can't get over how ridiculous it looks for Punia to be walking around Poshley Heights. He'll still stick around with us for a little while, so I hope you're getting used to him by now. So this cutscene in the Sanctum makes zero sense given the current context. The Shadow Sirens, who we literally just saw, somehow found this crystal star, except where's Vivian? And who is this cloaked guy? Anyway, they go and steal a fake version of the crystal star, and I have to venture into the background to access another room containing the real crystal star. With my jump storage, I can simply walk towards the back step up to get Y velocity, and then perform a super jump to get to the top left. Up top is a switch, which reveals a pipe that allows me to access the background. Once I enter the back room, I can simply walk up to the crystal star and grab it. On my way back, interestingly, there's a one-frame window where I can jump or hammer before talking to Pennington. It's not slower to do, so I decided to do it for fun. Afterwards, I move on to the Peach intermission. Similarly to Professor Frankly, since Punia is not normally set to be a part of this cutscene, he's never set to despawn. As a result, he'll follow Peach and Bowser around the entire time. Towards the end of the intermission, Peach sends Mayu an email, and it's this email that will occur after I leave the train in North Rogueport that will allow me to obtain jump storage and therefore perform Blimp Ticket Skip. For the most part, Bowser's speed is the same whether he jumps or just walks normally, so there's not too much optimization that's necessary here. For some reason, Bowser is really far behind us and is only discovering the Chapter 3 Crystal Star in Rockhawk's training room. After getting off the train, I can start to set up Blimp Ticket Skip by first getting jump storage. I first shoot Coops out such that when he returns back to the left, he'll be far away for his animation to be delayed by a frame when I press X again. As a result of this delay, Mayu attempts to jump on Coops for exactly 1 frame, giving me jump storage. From there, I can maneuver to the edge of the platform, pause and unpause to quickly get out of paper mode, and using the temporarily smaller hitbox of paper mode, I can move up along the railing just long enough to land out of bounds. I can then simply super jump straight into the background towards the blimp. With that, I've now entered Glitzville. For a more detailed explanation of Blimp Ticket Skip, I have a video that I'll link in the description. In Glitzville, I'll need to work my way through a series of fights. In order to begin fighting, I actually need to leave Glitzville and re-enter via the blimp. This is because the game is detecting that this is my first time visiting Glitzville. However, because of the fact that I'm in a post-Chapter 6 state, I actually won't be able to watch a cutscene that would normally give me access to the fights. Leaving and re-entering fixes this problem and allows me to access the back area of the Glitz pit. It's funny to note that even though I don't have the blimp ticket yet, Mayu somehow shows the ticket to the attendant. This does not work in Rogueport though. We believe that since the game assumes that you need the ticket to visit Glitzville in the first place, then there's no reason for the game to actually check it when going back to Rogueport. Interestingly, the cutscene of the blimp arriving in Rogueport is actually slower in the Japanese version compared to the other version. The blimp actually flies at a slower speed, resulting in an 8-second longer cutscene. Now that the flags are correctly set, I can walk towards the back area of the Glitz pit and I'll be on my way to obtain Yoshi. Normally you can't access a door if a guard is blocking it, however, due to our post-Chapter 6 state, the door is actually unlocked. I can still access the door by just facing away from the guard. By talking with Jolene, the manager of the Glitz pit, I set up the first fight. For each fight, the game assigns you a random condition that you have to meet in order to advance to the next fight. Sometimes it could be don't use your hammer or let your enemy damage you 3 times. Randomized conditions like these can be awful to deal with sometimes, however, I can simply advance RNG to get a condition that doesn't impede on our route. For most of the fights, including this Goomba fight, I'll just be using Fright Masks to quickly end each fight. I actually need a few additional Fright Masks later in the run, so I can make use of the audience's item throwing functionality. The game can randomly determine that the audience will throw an item at Mario. Each audience member type has a different list of items that they can throw, and luckily Shy Guys can throw Fright Masks. Unfortunately, this element of the audience is very tough to understand at the moment, so I just had to brute force for this spawn to occur. As a result, more time can theoretically be saved with these item spawns. I'll have to fight 9 more rounds before I can obtain Yoshi. After arranging the fight, I can just mess around in the locker room while waiting for the guard to come get me. I grab my second Fright Mask here. These gold bones can all be taken out quickly using the multi-bounce badge, so rather than consume a Fright Mask, I use multi-bounce instead. I wasn't able to get a suitable brute force scenario for a few fights in a row, so as a result I'll end up grabbing the last Fright Mask I need during the second to last fight. Finally, during this bandit fight, I managed to get the last Fright Mask. Normally, another character named Grubba is supposed to be on the Game Boy screen when arranging fights with Mario. However, since we're in a post-Chapter 3 state, Jolene appears instead. As a result, when Jolene arranges a fight for Sir Swoop, she ends up talking to herself. So these are the Armored Harriers, and they have impenetrable armor. The only way to defeat them is using Yoshi's Gulp ability, so as a result, it's intended that Mario runs away from the fight when encountering the Harriers for the first time. While in the fight, I get down to 1 HP in order to activate the Mega Rush badges for Chapter 7 fights. Sadly, because you're normally supposed to have the Yoshi egg follow you, the game removes any follower in your party. In my case, this means that we have to say goodbye to Punia for good now. With that, a white Yoshi is hatched out of thin air. When naming the Yoshi, you can immediately press the start button and the name will default to Yoshi. The Yoshi can spawn as 7 different colors, however, this is based off of the duration between picking up the egg in Chapter 3 and hatching it. Because we never actually picked up the egg in the first place, the duration is based off of the game's global timer. To reiterate, I need Yoshi in order to perform Palace Skip in Chapter 8, so now that I've obtained Yoshi, I can immediately leave Glitzville and head towards Chapter 7. In order to reach the last chapter of the game, I need to be in a post-Chapter 7 state. This therefore means that I need to complete Chapter 7 entirely. Yoshi's movement speed is 50% faster than Mario's walking speed. That, in addition to the time it takes to hop on and off Yoshi, means that if Mario takes 77 or more frames to reach the destination in a room, then it's faster to use Yoshi. If it takes between 43 and 76 frames when using Mario, then I have to make sure to test both using and not using Yoshi to see which is fastest. While talking to the Blimp attendant, I make sure to manipulate RNG for a random event in the sewers. When I head back down into the sewers, I manipulated a Mega Rush to appear in the Hammer Bros battle. I need a third Mega Rush in order to take out the Chapter 7 boss in only one turn, and in order to make the Chapter 8 boss battles go by a lot faster. In order to get back up top and head back to Chapter 7, I can again jump from the slanted pipe to the save block. Since I already unlocked the teleported room door, I can simply walk in and warp back to the X-Naut Fortress. In order to reach the Chapter 7 boss, I'll have to collect 3 key cards that are scattered throughout the fortress. The first one that I want to get is located in the leftmost room on this level. This first tile room has a path of certain tiles that I must follow, otherwise I'll get electrocuted. On my way out, I grab the Sleepy Sheep to help fill up my inventory for Palace Skip later. Once back in the hallway, I want to head towards the room containing the red note. This way, I'll switch to a Chapter 7 state. If I were to skip this, then one of the necessary key cards will not spawn in Grotus's room. With my newly updated Chapter 7 state, I can head into Grotus's room and grab the second card key. After returning to the hallway, I begin setting up for a trick called Elevator Skip. Normally I have to go to a higher level in the fortress and complete a quiz in order to unlock an elevator. However, I can completely skip the quiz. I first lure the Elite X-Naut to the left and encounter him. I switch to Coops and I manipulate an item to drop after the battle. I need this item to be farther to the left, so I can shoot Coops out, have him bring the mushroom over on his ricochet, and activate the elevator panel to cancel the item acquisition sequence. By getting Goombella far enough away from me, her animation takes an additional frame to occur. I can then grab the mushroom while activating Goombella. As a result, I can keep the text from Goombella opened, and tossing the item away allows enemies to begin walking around the room again. Right now, Mario can't move, however, I manipulated the Z-Yux to hit Mario from far away. I had to bring the mushroom far enough left to be in range of the Z-Yux's zone. The process of getting Goombella far away enough and then activating her before grabbing an item is called a delayed Goombella buffer, and we'll see this again for Palace Skip in Chapter 8. Once I leave the battle, I'll be able to walk around while still having the text boxes on screen. We call this state text storage. Once out of the battle, I can switch to Yoshi and push him through the elevator walls. When Yoshi begins to fall, I can close out of the text box. Closing out of the text box resets a flag that keeps track of whether a partner's ability is being used. By resetting this flag, I can activate Yoshi while he's falling. This causes me to warp to his Y position, allowing me to drop through the floor to reach the next level of the fortress. After completing the next tile room, I've collected the third and final card key. On my way out, I activate Yoshi right before the HP drain item lands on me. This actually ends up giving me jump storage, setting me up for a super jump in the last room of the chapter. Once I use paper mode to get through the red wall, I can step up onto the conveyor belt, giving me Y velocity, allowing me to perform a super jump. This allows me to skip going into the background once. After grabbing the card key for the door in this room, I have to head back into the background and reach the pipe to get onto the higher level. I activate the blue switch as soon as the platform begins moving back to the left. If I were to press it any earlier, the platform would start moving left, right before the cutscene ends. It actually ends up moving too far away from me to reach it in the first cycle, so I would have to wait for the platform to move left, and then back to the right. After putting the card key in, I can now fight against Magnus von Grapple 2.0. This is the second version of Lord Crump's robot, the first of which I'm normally supposed to encounter at the end of Chapter 2. Since I'm in peril, I can just deal 6 power bounces and take out Magnus in one turn. In order to be able to equip all 3 Mega Rushes, the Power Bounce, and Multi Bounce simultaneously, I chose to level up BP. With the final Crystal Star, I can now access the Palace of Shadows. Just to remind you, I only collected a total of 3 Crystal Stars, one from Chapter 1, one from Chapter 6, and now this one from Chapter 7. When we go to enter the Palace of Shadows, the game does not check to see if you have all 7 Crystal Stars, rather, it just checks to see if you're in a post-Chapter 7 state. In order to leave the fortress, I have to first talk to Tech on the lower level of the fortress. During this sequence, Tech explains to Mario that Grotus took Peach to the Palace of Shadows. He asks that Mario and crew rescue her and tell her thank you on Tech's behalf. Tech is running on backup power and shuts down shortly after talking to Mario.
Oh yeah.
Mario is now able to access the teleporter, so I'll have to make my way back up to the second level of the fortress. After returning back to the sewers, we meet back up with Professor Frankly, who explains we must make our way down to the Thousand-Year Door in order to access the Palace of Shadows. I need to continue filling up my inventory, so I grab the gradual syrup and the slow shroom while making my way towards the pipe. One thing that a lot of people are quick to suggest is that if we were able to get out of bounds, could I simply walk behind the Thousand-Year Door and enter Chapter 8 early? There's no loading zone behind the door, so the only way to access the last chapter is by visiting the Thousand-Year Door in a post-Chapter 7 state. Mario and his crew have reached the final area of their journey. The Palace of Shadows is the resting place of the Shadow Queen, which is the final boss of the game.
Oh yeah.
I quickly grab this stopwatch to help fill up my inventory further. Mario's hitbox in paper mode is just small enough to allow him to pass straight through these two gold bill blasters. It's possible to just barely jump around the fireball at the end of the room. There's another method to skip these bars that makes bypassing the fire a lot easier for real-time speedrunners, but it takes several seconds to set up. This next mini-boss is Dark Bones. Similarly to Red Bones, I have to walk up to him to trigger him, and I'm then ambushed by a bunch of Dry Bones. For some reason, I can't perform the same skip to enter the battle immediately as I could for Red Bones. Instead, I have to hammer some of the Dry Bones away and encounter Dark Bones normally. I can use Flurry's Gale Force to kill all of the Dry Bones immediately. When leveling up, I just upgrade my FP. I don't necessarily need more, but it's faster than switching over to health or BP. Again, I can just use paper mode to squeeze in between the bill blasters. To fill up my last slot in my inventory, I grabbed a jam and jelly in this hub room. I now have to go through a sequence of rooms where the correct door is designated with a lit up torch. Failing to pick the correct door will result in my arriving back in the hub room. In the background is the Riddle Tower, and we're normally supposed to go there after fighting Gloomtail. However, Palace Skip completely negates the need to visit the Riddle Tower. I will now be performing Palace Skip. I first encounter the left ember and manipulate an item to drop afterwards. The quickest way for me to end this fight is to use the Showstopper ability, which is available after defeating Magnus 2.0. With the dropped item, I can delayed Goombella buffer into it. This will give me tech storage, and I can use the other ember to get unstuck. Having a full inventory means I was able to toss the item back out into the room. As a result, when I leave this ember battle, I can perform another delayed Goombella buffer into the item, giving me double text storage. I do have to be careful to keep the two text boxes on different parts of the message, or else closing one of the text boxes will result in the other one closing as well. I want to be able to keep one open while closing the other, so I'll have to keep them staggered. I make my way to the left, swap to Yoshi, and push him out of bounds. By closing out of one of the text boxes, I can use Yoshi midair and teleport to his Y position. Luckily, I can use a spring that's always loaded in the room below to land back on the seam of the room. I can then use the other text box to perform another Yoshi teleport and use the other ember to stop me from falling under the floor. I can then perform a double jump after this battle, just like I did in Hooktail's castle. As a result, I'm able to just barely make it onto a platform containing a loading zone to another room. This room contains a chest with a key, which, luckily, updates my sequence position. When I leave the room, the normally black area will spawn. This entire process skipped the need to go to Chapter 4, Chapter 5, and most of Chapter 6, saving around an hour. There's a much easier version that can be performed in real-time speedruns, however, since I skipped the Ultra Hammer, I had to use the first discovered method of Palace Skip. I find it really satisfying to know that the original version of Palace Skip is now technically the fastest for this route. It's a nice trip down memory lane. After taking the airplane panel to unlock the last door, Mario and crew finally reach Grodus' lair. I can spend just one turn getting into peril. After defeating one of the Grotus X's guarding Grotus, I can deal 5 power balances to take him out. Since I'm already in peril, I can quickly do 6 power bounces to take out Bowser. On the following turn, I can take Kami Koopa out with 4 power bounces. I again level up FP since I don't have to scroll over to choose it like I would for HP or BP. So normally, I'm supposed to head to the right to go to the Shadow Queen. However, we've kept something secret for a few months. We have an alternate route for getting to the Shadow Queen, and I first have to head 2 rooms to the left. I first use the spring to go up, then I hop back on Yoshi and land on the spring twice. Since the spring is still moving the second time I land, I can actually obtain jump storage by hopping off of Yoshi right as I hit the spring. Then I need to go into paper mode and activate the airplane panel while I'm still in paper mode. Staying in paper mode will allow me to stay on top of the door frame to the right. I then have to get far enough into the wall such that I can unspin, restart paper mode by pausing and unpausing, step up into a higher level of the door frame, and perform a super jump. This will allow me to rise to the higher part of the room, which, if you remember, is where the Ember was. This room is connected to Gloomtail's room, and entering it in the game's current state causes Mario to warp to the Shadow Queen. Gloomtail's room is actually used for a cutscene involving Frankly after the Shadow Queen darkens the world. This therefore allowed me to skip a major part of the cutscene, saving approximately 2.5 minutes. Once inside the Shadow Queen fight, I first need to get into peril, which can be done in 1 turn by manipulating the audience to hit me twice. This ended up being pretty easy to brute force, luckily. Afterwards, I can deal 3 power bounces to start the next sequence of the fight. The Shadow Queen will now become invulnerable, and I have to hit her 3 separate times in order to end the fight. I first jump to count for one of these 3 required hits. I bring Flurry out to the front so that she can tank all 3 attacks from the Shadow Queen. Interestingly, you can't superguard any of the Shadow Queen's attacks on the Japanese version of the game. I also manipulated a Boo to hit the Shadow Queen at the end of her turn. This ends up counting as a second hit. Luckily, this means that I only need to hit the Shadow Queen one more time and the fight will end. I find it hilarious that because so much of the game is skipped at this point, this ending cutscene and most of the characters therein may make absolutely zero sense to some people. Now that I'm in the final phase of the fight, I can get into peril in one turn through the Shadow Queen's small hand attack. I have to take her out in 2 turns, so I'll do 6 power bounces in the first. To skip a long sequence of dialogue from the Shadow Queen, I can use a Sleepy Sheep to make her and her hand fall asleep. Then I can finish her with 5 bounces on the second turn. With those final power bounces, the Shadow Queen's been defeated. With only 4 partners, 2 paper mode abilities, 1 boot upgrade, 0 hammer upgrades, and 3 crystal stars, Mario's managed to save the world. The game never checks to see if you obtained all the normally mandatory partners, so this cutscene just shows all of them.
Oh, yes. Oh. Oh. yeah.
With my final input, the task timing ends at 2 hours and 58.23 seconds. I'd again like to thank the following people: Solidified Gaming, Muzz Yoshi, Venive, JD Aster, Trivial171, and Master June. You all do amazing work, and I could not have completed this task without you all. Thank you, the viewer, for watching this upload. Thank you to everyone who watched the development of this task over on my Twitch channel. I highly appreciate your support, and it always keeps me motivated to make more of these in the future. Thank you all for watching, and have a good one.